If you're the caregiver for someone who has posterior cortical atrophy dementia, PCA, then this video is for you. I'm going to be covering stage 1, 2, and 3 in this video with examples of how those things happened for our mom and, some scenarios and things like that. If you're new here, this is Disrupt Dementia, where my sister and I are sharing our journey with our mom who has PCA dementia. So this could be relevant to you if that is something you're going through. It could also be relevant if you're just going through Alzheimer's or just dementia with someone you love. We do have an amazing tracker that I suggest you grab. Go to disruptdementia.com to get your free copy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk about stage 1, and then I'm going to just give a quick example of that one. Then we'll do stage 2 examples, stage 3 examples. Cool? Cool. All right, so in stage 1 for PCA, it's basically like no official impairment, right? So the person doesn't necessarily experience any super obvious things, but there's like little things in hindsight looking back, you'll notice things. So for example, in October 2009, my mom was on a trip and she was like always a really organized person. Like organized, knew what she was doing, knew where she was going, like she was all the things. In 2009, she went on a trip alone. It was the first time she'd ever done that. And she got lost on the resort that she'd been at for a couple days. A little bit odd, right? So, but in hindsight, like we didn't think anything of it at the time. We just thought, oh, things happen, you get lost sometimes. Hindsight is everything. And looking back, that would be unusual. All right. So little things like that. Another time this was in 2013 and I did a video on this before, but basically we were sitting in the backyard and she looked over at my sister's patio door and the sun was hitting it half and half. So some of it was in shade, some of it was in the sun. So the screen door. And she said, well, isn't that strange? The screen has 2 different colors. No, it's not strange because that's not what's happening. The sun was casting a shadow on half of the door. So it's just like her brain couldn't figure out what was going on. But otherwise, totally normal mom, right? But that was just like one of those odd things. So for stage 2, these are, again, like very mild. It's starting to be a little more mild. We're seeing things a little bit more. So the person experiences subtle difficulties with some complex visual tasks, a loss of confidence. And again, these are stage 2 posterior cortical atrophy, PCA, dementia. So a loss of confidence in their driving ability, owing to finding it harder to judge distances, problems using a computer, such as being slower to type or enter information. Difficulties are starting with reading, writing, spelling, arithmetic, all of that's starting to happen. Now, it might not be every day. It might not be every word. It might not be, right? Like it's just, we're starting to notice things. Difficulty recalling and writing down telephone numbers. Difficulty assembling, objects like, maybe taking the battery out of your TV remote control and putting it back in, something like that. The person may experience vertigo or other balance problems, although some aspects of these develop later or not at all. They may experience difficulties finding the right words when speaking or odd visual sensations like occasional changes or washes of color in the center of their periphery of their vision. So stuff that you may not know about because they may not tell you because they just might think that's weird or it might scare them. So you might not even know that this is happening. These problems may be intermittent, difficult to describe, and not noticed by friends, family, or coworkers. Insight into, but uncertainty as to the cause of these experiences may contribute to anxiety in some individuals because this can be really scary. This stage may reflect the earliest signs of PCA, so posterior cortical atrophy, like I said, dementia. So especially where eye tests reveal no indication of eyesight problems, which I've done a whole video on this. My sisters also, we both talked about this on our channel about how mom's actual eyesight, we went to multiple different eye doctors and her actual eyesight was fine. because that's not what was actually happening. Her eyesight was okay. So she could look at, when they put that chart up, ABC, or wouldn't instead of say ABC, but it'd be A, Z, M, whatever. She could look at each letter and tell you what those were. But if you put a sentence, like a book in front of her and asked her to read a sentence, couldn't do it. So it was because these two things stopped talking, not because there was actually something wrong with her eyesight, okay? So some things that, related to those, some things, again, some of this stuff is in hindsight, are she started having trouble driving at night. So driving at night got a little scary. Driving in the rain was hard. In 2017, she had a car accident. She had a few car accidents just over her lifetime, a number of car accidents, more than the average person, I would say. Her handwriting started to change. So she had this beautiful cursive, and it started to get more scratchy, her handwriting. And sometimes she wouldn't even write anymore. It would just be printing. She would spell random words wrong. And this was really odd for her because mom was the one that, if you had a resume and you needed it to be edited, somebody to take a look at it, or something you were sending out, my dad, both of them were in politics. So she was the one that did all this stuff, she would look at the marketing stuff and make sure that everything was properly written and things like that. Very good at this. And she started just spelling words incorrectly, just putting an E where an E didn't belong, or, just little odd things like that, which was very strange for her. She also started getting obsessed with looking at her bank account. She had a line of credit that she was trying to pay off. And we all want to get rid of our debts. This was excessive. So this was 4 to 5 times a day. So for stage 3, this is when things start to be a little more noticed by people, where we're starting to see that something is actually happening here. So what falls under this is visual difficulties are acknowledged both by the person in question and now their family, friends, coworkers, and the person is likely to decide to stop driving at this point. So in stage 3, we're not driving anymore. Although some people may have already stopped by this stage, just depending on how these symptoms started to progress for them. Healthcare professionals familiar with young onset and atypical dementias may recognize a fundamental difficulty in perceiving what and where things are leading to characteristic problems, including difficulty seeing things which are right under your nose, or only seeing part of something. So not noticing the food on the edge of a plate and things like that. We call this pinhole, and I'm going to show you in a second what that looks like. General clumsiness in people who were not previously clumsy, such as, knocking things over, inaccurate reaching out, unsure of depth of where something is, putting a glass down sideways, difficulty finding things in a handbag or a cupboard, difficulty dressing, performing other activities, such as cutting a piece of toast in half. Seems difficult and odd the way they might do it. Coordination, inability to tell the time on a clock or a watch, getting lost on a page when reading and being unable to kind of find where they were, if they're still really able to read at this point. Problems with writing, spelling, and dealing with numbers is much more pronounced at this point. Paying for items. So this is when they may say to the cash register, I don't know how much money this is, right? That kind of stuff starts happening. They don't know what a quarter is versus a dime. Mild memory problems for recent events starts to show, but it's not as pronounced as all these other symptoms. They occur just a little bit less. So they might be able to remember events very well, but won't be able to learn something new. So mild difficulty retrieving the correct word in a conversation, again, starts to become a little more pronounced. So this also may accompany some big anxiety, which we definitely had with our mom. Her anxiety skyrocketed during this time. Just because it's really scary. She knew something was going on, right? So it was not great. So I'm going to go through some symptoms. We've got a lot more in this section because this is when things were much more noticeable and much more obvious. So again, this is for PCA, posterior cortical atrophy, dementia. So once she went to work and she had to enter the parking lot, And the way that her parking lot was, it was underground. And so there was one door and you would go through that door, and then there was another door. So that door would close. Your car would be kind of in the middle of these two doors, right? Your car's in here. And then the next door would open for security, right? So they will only let one car in at a time. And then the next, whoever was coming next, they'd have to beep in. So to maintain security, because she was a justice of the peace. So important that we have the right people in the building. So nobody knows what happened, because at this time also, what we found was that she was very defensive when anything went wrong. That could potentially be her fault. It was never her fault. So what we were told was that the garage door broke and it crashed down on her car. The likelihood is that that's not actually true. What probably is true is that perhaps she came through the front door and the garage door, the second one, was already open still, and maybe just hadn't closed for the person who had been in front of her. And she forgot, or logically couldn't put together, that she shouldn't go through. Like that door should be closed. And so she went through, and that door did come down on her car. Okay. She did have another fall at this point. So anything for this type of dementia, because of how it was, especially for our mom, is that it's very much like a crack in your windshield, right? So every time you go over a bump or anything, the crack gets bigger and bigger and bigger. What that means here is that anytime she had a car accident, her head would go like this. So it would jig and maybe spark another crack. Anytime she fell down, same thing. So falls, anything that would make her brain rattle, not good. Would almost make us jump. We have started to notice over time that when a bad fall happens, we know we'll start to see changes, like some in her. Okay. So she had another really bad fall on a cruise in 2019. Then she had a car accident in 2020. Never drove again after that. But again, like, it's the coordination, and it's also the ability, even for her falls. What was starting to happen was that she no longer, like, when you fall, you try to protect yourself, right? You put your hands out and you might land on your hands or your wrists or whatever that might be. She stopped being able to do that. So when she fell, she would just fall, right? Like, her brain just stopped connecting what was happening. So sometimes her falls were bad because she didn't try to stop the fall from happening. She also always read books, and she started complaining about not being able to read, that her eyesight was bad. It was always again, her eyesight is bad because, of course, you never want to think your brain isn't working. It's terrifying, so scary. It must have been really horrible for her too, when she started realizing that it was not just that her eyesight was bad and something else was happening. So she, sorry guys, I didn't expect to get upset right here. So she would always read books and would be complaining about her eyesight and would blame her cataracts. So after a lot of that and hopefulness, I guess, on my side for sure, and I'm sure Pam's, we were like, yeah, let's have the cataract surgery. So in 2019, she had cataract surgery as well. I would say it helped for a couple months, maybe. And I'm not sure that I don't know if it really did. I know that that's what she said. I don't know. Because then she started complaining about it again. And that's when we started really going to a lot of eye doctors. Okay, so on a table, this is where I'm going to show you this sort of pinhole vision that I mentioned. I'm going to show you an image, and you can see sort of what a pinhole vision looks like. But basically, on a table with multiple items, she couldn't pick out her glasses. If I was like, you need to get your glasses. finding them on a table was very difficult because the peripheral, like when I look at a table, like I'm looking, even if I'm looking straight at you, I can see in my peripheral that these are my glasses. I can see that this is my water glass. I can see that this is my phone, right? I don't have to look at it. I know what's happening around me. She doesn't have that. So in order for her to see her glasses, she has to look directly at her glasses. She would cut an apple pie in a strange way. So, this is how you would normally cut an apple pie, and this is how she would cut it. We had people over, and my sister and I left Mom because it was her family. They were going to have just, call it grown-ups, even though we were grown-up, but we were like, it's grown-up time. You guys are having grown-up time, and the kids are leaving. And so Mom cut the pie like this. So everybody noticed something was odd there. Our family's been really good about all of this as well and it's been very difficult for her brothers and sisters as well. But, so this is just one of those moments again that it was an obvious thing to others. She made a sandwich in the wrong order, right? Like this is how you would put together a sandwich, right? If these are the items that you're putting on a sandwich, this is the way that you would do it. How she did it was like this. So that's not the same, right? Clearly, that's not how we do it. She put the mayo like on the outside and didn't understand why it wouldn't be there. She was no longer able to follow a recipe at this point because it's too many steps, and she didn't understand those steps a lot of the time. So, we're like, if I'm going to make something, I might have the next 3 steps in my head. I've got to set the oven. I've got to get the parchment paper out and put it on the pan. We've got to get the pan out. And like, this is how we do things without even thinking, right? Like if I got to make chicken, I'm like, it all just happens. She wouldn't be able to do that. So it would be like, get the pan. And that's what I'd say. Go get the pan. Sometimes it was also, where's the pan? The pan's I'd open the cupboard. Sometimes I'd open the cupboard and I wouldn't say anything other than get the pan, and I'd walk away so that she felt like she was doing that, right? Like I always tried to, both my sister and I, we always tried to make her feel like she was still empowered to do things. We wanted her, even though we might take some steps away, she still was doing something, right? So, that was difficult because she was a cook. She loved cooking. She loved doing stuff like that. That's like her, it was her, love language, really. Like if you were there, she was like, oh, I'm going to make dinner and we're going to have dinner, and that was like a really big thing, that we always did. So, she walked downstairs. One morning she came up to my room. I lived with her, and she came up to my room and said, this might sound like a dumb question, but I don't know how to make my coffee. Which was crazy. For years, she's used a Keurig. I mean, her morning routine was wake up, brush your teeth, go to the bathroom, put her bathrobe on, get her slippers on, go down to the kitchen, make her Keurig coffee, come back up, sit in her room, read her book while drinking her coffee. She had a big chair that she would have in her room, and she would just relax in there early in the morning. So all of a sudden, she didn't know how to use this machine that she's been using for years. And so I went down, and sometimes at this point, you could still trigger the muscle memory. So I said to her, put the cup right here. She put the cup in, and then I put the coffee in. I closed the machine, pressed the button, and then her muscle memory started to trigger. So she started getting out the sugar and the spoon that she needed. So sometimes at this stage, you could still trigger that muscle memory. She had trouble at this point seeing this difference in the stairs, and anything really that the contrast. There was no contrast to things. So this is when we bought these carpet. They're just these carpet things. Like they're like, maybe this wide and this long. And they are like stickers that you put on the stairs so that the person can see the difference. So we've got dark ones against the lighter colored stairs so that she could actually see. I put my foot on the dark part, right? When she went to the grocery store, this was happening. I mentioned this as one of the actual parts of the things in the stages, which is she did ask them about money. Like she was like, I don't know. What do I give you? Her anxiety, like I mentioned, was very high during this time. So the doctor did prescribe her an anxiety medication. Hallucinations were getting very intense. These were when the scary ones happened. I did talk about this in another video, so you can check that video out as well. There were very, very scary hallucinations. When trying to sign a Christmas card, she could no longer sign her signature. I had her practice on a sheet of paper for a while, and it didn't look anything. She didn't even really understand what it even looked like. Finally got her to able to just write Lil instead of her full name, which worked. That's fine. She didn't want her water. This one day she was at Pam's. She didn't want her water. She was like, had a glass of water. And she's like, got this much water left. And she was like, I'm done with this. And Pam was like, you can just dump it out. Because you don't realize, you don't know what you don't know at this point, right? So Pam was like, if you don't want to dump it out. And so Mom is standing on this side of the island. There's a whole island. And then there's the counter where the sink is. And she just dumped it out. Just right on the island. And Pam was like, whoa, okay. This is fine. Cleaned it up. Didn't make a big deal about it, of course, because we never wanted to embarrass her or make her feel wrong. But that's a strange thing to have happen, right? That's abnormal. She said to me one day, so I had a dog named Buffy. Buffy and Mom were like two peas in a pod. They loved each other very much, but Buffy was my dog. I had Buffy in my home before I moved in with Mom, for, I think 8 years or 6 years before that happened. But Mom would say, did you buy her or did I buy her? And I would say, Buffy. And she said, yeah. Was she always with me or was she with you? And instead of saying, what are you, crazy? Of course she's my dog. Instead of doing that, I just would tell her the story that she was the first person that met her. I brought her right here to meet Mom and we went to the pet store and bought stuff, right? So I tell her this whole story about that. But for her to not know that, right? It's these really odd and God, the brain is so wild. When these things are happening, you're so thrown by it. But again, one of our biggest things is to never make her feel less than, never make her feel dumb, never make her feel wrong, maintain her dignity, right? These are always the things that we try to do, especially in this time. We still try to do it now. It's just life is very different now. Another time around, it was probably 8:30 at night. She came and said, I need a Band-Aid. And I was like, why do you need a Band-Aid? What happened? And she had a cut on her leg. And I was like, what is happening? She was dry razor, with a sharp razor blading her dry legs. So, and these are the things you start going, okay, that we can't have that, right? You start just solving problems. You become a mad, crazy problem solver. So then, I got an electric razor so that can never happen again, right? You just start constantly trying to solve problems. She randomly, and this would be random, some days she would know, some days she wouldn't know. I do find that it was always around how much sleep she had. If she slept well, she was much more cognitive. I mean, I'm like that. I'm much better. My brain works a lot better when I sleep well, right? So definitely same with her. So she would randomly though forget how to use her shower. So some days I would have to go in, turn it on, get it to a good temperature, and then she would get in and have her shower. And again, a lot of times once that happened, she could maintain herself in the shower and do everything she had to do. That changes in a different stage, but not this one. Didn't understand what the button on her pants. So she had a pair of pants with a zipper and a button. And she came in and said, "What is this? Why is this here?" And I just was like, "Well, that's just so you don't drop your pants. You don't be walking around naked bum." I always try to use humor, make her giggle. But again, this is just one of those things where you go, like, whoa, what? She started having trouble walking, getting out of breath a lot when she would go walking. So that started to get a little scary, but it wasn't every time. So it was hit or miss. Around this time, a lot of these things are not every time. But around this time, we did start the day program. So this was in 2023. We started her going to a day program, which was with the Salvation Army in our area, which they're amazing. So good. Best thing ever. Recommend 100%. So they have a day program Monday to Friday. She only was going once a week, and then we amped that up as time went by. But awesome, because I worked from home, and it was really starting to get difficult for me to get anything done because she was getting bored a lot. So she was constantly trying to get me to help her with something, or, she would forget how to use a remote control. So I'd have to go down and get the TV on, and then I'd get back up and start back in my project. And then she'd interrupt me and say, "I want to take the dog out." And I'm like, "Buffy doesn't need to go out. It's only 10 o'clock in the morning. She only went out 2 hours ago." And also I didn't want her taking Buffy out because it was starting to get a little worrisome, her being out there by herself. One day she decided that she's going to clean the kitchen and, doesn't know how to use the vacuum. And so it was like, I was constantly sometimes I would just give up. I'm like, I can't work, because she was constantly in my room, in my office, trying to get me to help her with something or whatever. And the final one was that she tried to get real money. So she came to me with her phone and said, "I need money out of this. How do I get my money?" And I said, "What? What do you mean? Your bank?" And she said, "No, I need money. I want money." And I said, "Well, that's your phone. So we can use it for your bank. If you wanted to log into your bank. But if you want real money, we can take your card and we can go to the bank and get you real money." She just didn't understand why she couldn't get money out of this. And I don't even know what to say about that. That's just something that happened. So those are a bunch of things. Now, all of this, the reason I know all of this is because we tracked everything with our tracker, which is free. You can get it at disruptdementia.com. It's a template that you can use, and it's great for this kind of stuff. Not that you're going to start doing YouTube videos necessarily, but it's great to be able to understand where you are in this journey. And also super helpful when you go see the doctor and want to explain what symptoms you've seen since the last time. How many falls have they had? How much are you noticing them missing words? How much are they, all the different things you can track using our tracker. So get it at disruptdementia.com. I'm going to be doing stage 4 and 5 in the next video. I might do 4. I don't know yet what that's going to look like, but it'll either be stage 4 only or stage 4 or 5. And then I'll do 6, 7, although I don't have a lot for 7 yet, knock on wood. Not knock on wood. I don't want a lot for 7. Anyway, it's confusing. So anyway, watch next week when the other video comes out, and then you'll know what I did. Also, don't forget to comment, subscribe. We want to know what's going on with you. Do you relate to any of this? Can you hear yourself in these stories? Please share with me, and my sister. We really want to know, and we want to be able to help you with whatever we can. So let us know. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.